Does sex hurt?
Yes and no. I was having really painful intercourse and I was just like, what's going on? Like, we're lubing up. It can't be that. I just thought it was normal. I was just like, oh, this is just how women get on with it.
I passed out in public.
So you have to open you up
They have
first.
to open you up. And on my first surgery, they opened me up and had a look around. So from what the naked eye saw, he felt I looked okay. And then years later, I was diagnosed with deep pelvic endometriosis. I have pain every day.
Are you in pain now?
I'm always in pain. In an hour's time, I could be on the floor, out of it, like being sick, in agony, rolling around. Like, am I losing it? Considered an invisible illness.
There's blood, there's a lot of it, there's pain, there's a lot of it. I freaked out, he freaked out, he's panicking. He was still living at his mum, so we were at his house. He's like, what am I going to tell my mum? I only just changed my bed sheets. And I was just like, scared, what the hell is going on?
Unfortunately, post-surgery for me, my symptoms got worse. So I'd be in A&E every other month. This is a full body disease and it's incurable also.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Cilia Li Show, the podcast all about helping you to become the best version of yourself in all areas of your life. I'm your girl, your bestie, Cilia Li. So March, if you don't know, is actually the month of endometriosis. Is that right? Yeah. Anyway, let me introduce you to Andri and Leonie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hi Celia, thank you.
How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, really excited to be here and talk about this topic and
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
it's an important one. So yeah, definitely honoured to be here.
I'm so excited as well because I was like, the fact that you two, because I met you at an event about a month ago, and then we actually never met. This is the first time us meeting, and then we're talking about, and you told me something about the sex life and how it affects your sex life. So I was like, okay, this is juicy. We need to talk about it because people don't know about it. And also, I don't really know what endometriosis is. It's a mouthful. And I've heard of it, but I don't actually know what it is because people probably think it's just bad period pains, right? And not only that, you also have adenomyosis.
Yeah,
That's
you
right,
said it right, yeah.
And I've never heard of that.
Okay.
And then fibroids,
Yeah.
and you have PCOS.
Yeah.
The PCOS?
Yeah,
which,
PCOS.
which stands for polycystic.
Ovary syndrome.
Introduce yourself, what you do, things like that.
So my name's Leoni Sheriff. I am a singer-songwriter, producer. I work mainly with artist development, helping new artists on their early journeys in music and mentoring, which I'm really passionate about. And I also have my own brand, Sensing by Sheriff, which is a fragrance brand which encompasses music and scent, and just kind of try to create an intersensory realm where, fragrance meets music, and the scents are actually based on specific songs. So that's the other thing. And I'm definitely an advocate for chronic illnesses, and specifically endometriosis and adenomyosis, because of the impact it has on your life and my personal experience. So last year I became an advocate through Endometriosis UK. They have an EDI forum, which is stands for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. So I'm a volunteer, but I'm a representative for them. So when it comes to them discussing their initiatives, catering to that group of people, I act as a critical ear to some of their operative plans. So that's been really cool. Yeah.
That's a hard introduction to that. Well, yeah. Hi, I'm Andri Constantinou. I wear many hats, but primarily I'm a nutritional therapist and a somatic coach. And my work is really about empowering people to have the knowledge and the education to really live their best selves, to really be connected in mind and body, and to know that even if you are diagnosed with a chronic health condition, you can still thrive and live in an optimal way. I was diagnosed with endometriosis how long ago now? Nearly 10 years ago now, but it was a really long journey to that diagnosis from day one. And I've always been really curious about food and nature and herbs and spices and how that can kind of impact our health and how we can use that as medicine. And so I went on a journey of exploring what works for me, what helps with my symptoms. And then I found a nutritionist who changed my life, kind of gave me my life back. and then I trained as one as well. So that's the work that I do in this, and I'm really happy to be having this conversation.
So tell me, an audience, what is endometriosis? Apart from it being bad period pains.
Okay. Physiologically, endometriosis is where the tissue that is in your uterus that kind of builds up and then sheds every single month as your period grows in other parts of your body. That simplistically, that's what it is. And so what happens when these tissues grow in other parts of your body that aren't your womb, that don't have an area of escape, is those tissues respond to your hormones every single month. They build up and then they break down, but they don't really have anywhere to go. So if you think that this tissue is in your abdominal cavity or it's been found in people's lungs, typically it affects your reproductive system and your digestive system. But if you think that this tissue isn't in your, or like it isn't, in your uterus where it then has somewhere to be released, it's then kind of got nowhere to go. It's creating scarring, lots of inflammation. There are lots of theories around how endometriosis is developed, like what's the cause of it. Some is to do with the way your menstrual blood flows. Some is to do with generational trauma. Some of the theories are around a lot of stuff that's going on in the gut. So it's really like a whole body system. And a lot of the time there's a big nervous system part of endometriosis. There was a study done, and I can't remember the exact fact, but a lot of women who've got endometriosis had some sort of history either in their lives or in past lives or generationally of sexual trauma. So there's lots of different layers to it. Should we talk about the symptoms?
We go to that in a sec. What is adenomyosis?
So, I think Andri's breakdown of what endometriosis was spot on. And I'd say adenomyosis they refer to it as kind of endometriosis's cousin. But it's, again, endometrial type tissue that instead of growing outside of the uterus on other organs, it grows within the muscle wall of the uterus. So it's confined to the muscle wall of the womb, and it's these tissues that build up, cause inflammation, scarring, bleeding, and a lot of pain. And it normally shows up as kind of like a bulky uterus. It can also like impact the position that the uterus sits. It can cause it to lean backwards or rest on other organs, which can obviously impact your other organs like bladder, bowel. It's like an additional element, if you like, but it's just confined to the muscle.
Fibroids.
I don't even know the specific medical explanation, but I would classify it as muscle growths in the womb, again, within the muscle. So there is some theories as to like whether how they differentiate between fibroids and adenomyosis, but fibroids are more balls, I think.
I was going to say, is it like lumps?
Lumps, or like kind of they can show up like cyst-like, but they've got like a density to them where the cysts can burst and erupt. Fibroids are solid masses, and I think they're quite common, but they also can like affect, cause pain and heavy bleeding for some women as well. With adenomyosis, there's also two types. There's like focal adenomyosis, which is can present more similarly to fibroids, and then there's diffuse. So focal is kind of like more bumps, and then diffuse it's kind of like all throughout. So yeah, they kind of, I think on imaging sometimes there can be confusion over fibroids or focal adenomyosis, but they are specifically two different things.
And last one, PCOS. PCOS. Is it PCOS or PCOS? I thought we always say PCOS.
They shorten it to PCOS.
Yeah. So it's polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is different to polycystic ovaries.
Oh, really?
And so when you've got polycystic ovaries, it basically means that you form multiple cysts on your ovaries, but don't necessarily have the other like syndrome systemic identifiers of PCOS. So with PCOS, you typically have markers of like insulin resistance. So you have a bit of trouble managing your blood sugar levels. You might have higher androgens, whereas if you've just got the cysts on the ovaries, you might not have that. So androgens are the male sex hormones. So in a woman, when they're higher, they can cause this imbalance. And And typically with PCOS, you'll see a lot of either missed periods or irregular periods or super heavy periods, but it's underpinned by, so the imbalance of the hormones. So you might see male pattern hair growth. You might see a woman with PCOS because she's got higher male hormones. She might put on muscle really easily, and also struggling to manage blood sugar levels, which is then like inflammatory to the ovaries, which is why it can then cause imbalance in like the way your periods show up, etc.
I feel like it's another whole episode to talk
Yeah,
about
they are.
what it is and
They
go
are
into,
like
innit? Yeah, but today we're going to talk about your own story, so we're going to focus on that. And actually, I do have a question. So usually when someone who has endometriosis, for example, do they have PCOS as well? Because I always hear it that they sort of come together. Like,
interestingly enough, my diagnosis for endo took a very long time. We're talking 20 plus years.
Wow.
go to your story, yes.
Crazy. But what actually was, because, I had a misdiagnosis, I had surgeries that didn't pick it up, all kinds of things. But what actually got me properly diagnosed was suspicion of, I had polycystic ovaries. Not specifically, didn't go fully down the testing route of if I had the syndrome, but I had like lots of follicles showing up on my ovaries on imaging, and that's what prompted them to escalate me to be seen by a specialist, who then felt like they thought I had endo. So I think all of these conditions can cross correlate. Like a lot of women that have endo can end up having adenomyosis, and they might end up having like PCOS, and vice versa. So I think they can. Yeah, they can.
Yeah, I do see it a lot in practice, like a lot of women who've got, because they're ultimately it's like inflammation and like an imbalance in, not necessarily just in your hormones, but just like in the body. So they can, and because they are, they're not necessarily, I mean, there's a genetic component, you can be more susceptible, but it's not like a condition where it's like you have this gene, therefore you're going to have this. It can kind of show up in different ways, or one person in the family might have it and nobody else can have it. So I think it's very individual.
So when you were diagnosed, actually, in fact, before, what made you go to a doctor? Like, what was happening in your body?
Oof. I feel like they're episodes all on their own.
I mean, I'll try and summarize as best as I can. So my symptoms presented from the onset of period, from day one.
From puberty?
Where we're very similar.
From the very
day one.
first period. So I got my periods when I was 13. I had a bit of a false alarm type period. So it came, but then it didn't come for a couple of months. And I thought, this is quite easy breezy. And then one day I was hit with a major pain. It was just something I'd never imagined was even possible. Profuse throwing up, fainting, agony, contractual pain of the uterus, just feeling like I was just unable to bear this pain. And that was my first proper period. And then that was the beginning of the rest of my life, basically. So from that point on, I would struggle with period pain, like diabolical pain, for 3 days solid, a month. And then after that, it died down and become maybe more of a normal-ish, more manageable period pain. So I was used to that from really early on. Went to the doctors from when I was really young, and kind of just got given pills. At the time, I was given like Ponstan and mefenamic acid, and nothing worked. I just used to be in agony every month, and I had to get used to like dealing with that. And then I think eventually, in my later teens, I got put on the pill, because I had an incident where I passed out in public, and just from the pain. And once I got home, my mum took me to the GPs, and they just were like, we'll put you on the pill. I was 19 at the time. And I'd say it kind of helped the symptoms, probably masked a lot of things, but helped calm things down for about 10 years or so, until it erupted back up. So I was constantly kind of trying to find out what the cause was, and it just wasn't investigated to the degree that it could have come to a diagnosis. It was just kind of like, you have really bad periods. Scans I would have, nothing showed up on imaging apart from fibroids and cysts. So Endometriosis doesn't necessarily show up on imaging. The definitive gold standard diagnosis is laparoscopic excision surgery. They have to excise tissue and get pathology to say that this is legit.
So you have to open you up first.
They have to open you up. And on my first surgery, they opened me up and had a look around. I didn't have an endo specialist. I had a general gynae who didn't bother to take any pathology, no biopsies. So from what the naked eye saw, he felt I looked okay. And then years later, I was diagnosed with deep pelvic endo. So it was just missed. It was more behind my uterus, and unspecialized surgeons and physicians wouldn't look there. They just kind of look on the gynecological organs. So it was a really long...
So it puts you under a lot of stress, isn't it?
Yeah, you really have to take it into your own hands. You can't really trust the health system. And there are specialist gynecology centres. Did you go to a BSGE centre?
Not even a centre. It was the consultant was BSCG accredited.
Yeah,
and that's
why. No one tells you about that though.
No.
You have to find that out yourself. I had to find the same thing out myself as well. So
what did you do to find out? Like, did you do?
I joined like an online support group when I first heard the word endometriosis through my sister, because she's a hairdresser. And she was talking to a client about me, and she was like, my sister's periods, they're just horrendous. Like, she's in bed for the whole week. And then, like, even during the month, like when she ovulates, like middle of the month, like when she ovulates, like she's in a lot of pain, like she can't stand up sometimes. And she was talking to a client, and she mentioned endometriosis. And then that's when I started digging, and I went to support groups, and I got as much information as I could. And then I presented my case to a gynecological consultant. And she actually believed me, and I was like, here we go.
What do you mean she believed you? As in, they just think...
Yeah, she was like, I think you've got endometriosis. And the symptom for me that made her think this is more than just periods was I was having really painful intercourse. And I was just like, what's going on? Like, we're lubing up. It can't be that. So that was like the main symptom that kind of drove me to it, because everything else I just thought was normal. I was just like, oh, this is just how women get on with it. Like, my sister and my mum and whatever, they were like, periods are not that bad. It's fine. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'm just overreacting to my period. And for a long time I thought that, because on the scans, everything's normal. Everything's fine.
Because I used to have this client. She's young as well. It's like, I guess probably around the same time when you started as well. She's 20 now or 21. Anyway, she's constantly have to go to doctors, get a scan, ultrasound. They said they can't find anything. All of that. I feel so sorry for you lot, basically. It's like you probably thought, okay, I'm gonna get ultrasound. Finally, the solution. You go there. Oh, disappointment. Go back. Back and forth, and it's like it's a lot. It's really draining.
Very draining.
And I think, has it got a toll on your mental health, thinking that it's what's wrong with me, anything like that?
Yeah, like I said, my journey, it took a very long time. And I went through having the surgery to then being told, you're fine. That's almost like, okay, I must be really tripping now. I also had a family member a cousin who has it, and she was the only person that I'd heard of it from, and she was also like, I think you have it. Like, and I actually was like looking, and it sounds kind of crazy, but I think a lot of us can relate. Like, when you get your diagnosis, it's like a weird bittersweet moment, but you feel relief, because up until that point you're literally like, am I losing it? What, but it's in your reality every day. For me, like, obviously it ended up being more than just period. It wasn't just around the cycles. Like, over the last 6 to 4 years, it's become something that's unfortunately an everyday pain. I have pain every day.
Are you in pain now?
I'm always in pain, but what it is moderate. It just has its different varying degrees as to how bad it can get. So I could be having a conversation with you right now, and then, like, in an hour's time, I could be on the floor, out of it, like, being sick, in agony, rolling around, like. It's literally, and I think that's what's so, like, misleading about the condition as well. Like, it's considered an invisible illness because people can't really see it. Like, how you present to the outside, no one would believe what really goes on behind closed doors.
So, in terms of work, do you call in sick? And if you do, what do they say? Because I'm sure you probably have to call in sick more than once. So what do they say? Like, especially if it's a man.
Just a quick one. I want to ask you a big favor. Can you please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already done so? Follow me on Spotify or whatever platform you're listening on, because it would help me grow my channel, help me reach more people. It would mean the world to me. Thank you so, so much. All right, let's get back to the episode.
They might think, oh, she's just making excuses.
I had one male boss and I was having a particularly bad episode. Like in the morning, like I got up and I was in so much pain, like my body was shaking, but I forced myself, I got ready. This was back in the day before work from home became acceptable in a lot of places. And I forced myself to go into the office and I was like, it'll wear off. But then I got to the office and it didn't wear off. And I said to my manager, like, I'm having a really bad day with my period. I need to go home and just sit at home with my hot water bottle, and then I can probably carry on with work once I've sorted myself out, taken some pain medication, etc. And he looked at me and he was like, so are you sick or not? And I was like, very shortly after I left that job. But I don't think he'd get away with that nowadays with the awareness around it. But yeah, it's very difficult because you feel like, I go through this every month. How can I take time off for this every month? But where I'm working now, they're very understanding. They're very much like, your health goes first. The business, kind of like what we do at work. Obviously, I need to be doing my job. But, that is not the priority. The priority is like you and your health. And I've had really understanding managers there who are like, it's cool. They don't even like log it and take it off my sick days and stuff. And maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but I just won't tell you where I work. But it's just, the difference is wild, because the place I'm at now, it's very person-centric. It's very care for the whole person. The place I was before, it was very much like business is king. And that wasn't the right environment for someone like me who needs that flexibility.
What about you? Because you said you're in pain
all the time, yeah. So yeah, back in the older days, I feel like I got to the point where I used to not want to say, if I had a male boss particularly, I wouldn't want to, I got to the point where I didn't say it was my period anymore. I'd say I've got an upset tummy or I've got a bug, because my periods were associated with throwing up and vomiting. That was just a symptom that I had every single month. And I just said I'm unwell, because if I said period, it was met with that same kind of, so you're not, and I've even experienced it with female bosses, if I'm going to be honest.
Because they don't have it themselves to do it.
They can't relate. So yeah, I mean, I had to come out of full-time work. I had quite a demanding role before. I used to work in accountancy, and it just, I think when it hit home was when I was healing from my surgery, which was the one that diagnosed my endo. And just due to the kind of dynamics of the working environment, there wasn't, I remember coming round from anaesthetic and seeing things popping up on my phone to do with work. And that was kind of the thing that was, combined with just my struggling to kind of maintain full-time work. I came out of full-time work and I just work part-time, and obviously I have my own ventures and businesses and things like that. But it's very different now. Like, my current employers are much more understanding.
Have you ever tried to explain what it is?
Yeah, now I'm very vocal about it. I don't the people I work with are great. I've got great colleagues, a great manager, and she understands, and my colleagues understand. So like when they see me kind of a little bit, they know. But that was never the case before. I used to feel a little bit like I didn't want to over-explain, because I felt like they're just not going to understand. They're going to think it's your period or, Now I do. Now I don't feel anyway, because I think it's important for people to try and you can never really empathise if you don't know what it feels like, but maybe they'll try and understand a bit more,
So my friend, we used to work together, and whenever she come on her period, she literally would take the whole week off. So we're personal trainers. We used to be working in the gym, and she said, she's feeling sick, all of that kind of stuff, and obviously, because as a woman, but the thing is, I don't get heavy periods, I don't get painful periods, but I understand some people do, so I understood it, right? But I remember one of our regional manager, like, he's a man, he was like, oh, she's off again. Oh.
That old chestnut.
Yeah, like that. And also, when she was leaving that job, she could have used that as an excuse, I don't know. She literally, on her last week, she came on her period, so she didn't as in last week of her work, like where she's supposed to be there, she didn't come in at all. So then the manager was like, she didn't come in. She obviously did it on purpose. I was like, oh no, but she was on a period. He was like, oh, that's just excuse. Really, come on now, like that.
Yeah. I don't know if a lot of workplaces are like this, but I now declare my health condition like someone would declare a visible disability because everybody can see it. I declare it now, and I'm just like, and I'm really clear with my management or like my leadership. If I'm off sick because I got the flu, or if I'm off sick because it's my period, because it's like when you take into account being off sick and you think it's the flu each time, it's like, why is this person getting sick all the time? I mean, you know, people do, but I'm very clear to say I'm off sick for this, I'm off sick for this, just so that there's no confusion. That like, I don't know, just to kind of like help, you know, give visibility into what the reasons I'm off sick for. Like, I remember I used to feel like, I mean, I still feel a little bit insecure sometimes when, if for example, like I'll be off sick, maybe I had the flu, and then the following week I had my period, knocked me for 6, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I literally just come back from being sick. But you have to take care of yourself. You have to put yourself first, because they're not going to at the end of the day. So,
you know how you said you discussed it from the beginning. So, in terms of dating, when you meet someone, do you tell them from the beginning? Because now it's gonna lead to sex life as well, right?
I have. Well, not always. So when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, I guess pre-diagnosis or like soon after diagnosis, I hadn't really. But then I'd kind of spoken to her about it before we were in a relationship. But then my most recent relationship, which ended last year, when we first started dating, before, you know, when we were just in the talking stage, I sat him down and I spoke to him. I was like, there's blood, there's a lot of it, there's pain, there's a lot of it. And I was just like, you know, sometimes I bleed during sex as well. So like, that's like one of the symptoms that I have. And I can't be with someone who's squeamish because I don't know when it's going to happen. Whereas a relationship in my past, that happened and they freaked the fuck out. I freaked out. Sorry, I don't know if we can swear.
Yeah. Is this the first time it happened?
Yeah, this was like the first time that the bleeding had happened. Oh, wow. I freaked out. He freaked out. He's panicking. He was still living at his mum, so we were at his house. He's like, what am I going to tell my mum? I only just changed my bed sheets. And I was just like, scared. What the hell is going on? And I was just like, you know, that can't, like, I just felt so shit about myself. And then the partner that I was most recently with, we sat down, we had that conversation. I was really gory with him in terms of all the details, and he didn't even blink. And I remember the first time we had sex and the bleeding happened, I didn't even realise it had happened because I felt so comfortable with him that I wasn't like on the lookout for these things happening. And then, like, you know, afterwards, and like we were cuddling, kissing, whatever, and like we got up to sort everything out. There was like blood everywhere. It was on me. It was on him. It was like a blood, like a murder scene. I was like, oh my gosh.
Do you not smell it?
I'm so sorry. No, I didn't smell it. That sometimes I do, but this particular time I didn't. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't know this had happened. And he was like, oh, I've noticed it like ages ago. And I was like, and he just didn't blink. And it like just made you, you know, like the two reactions were just so different. And, you know, okay, we broke up, but like, I'll always be grateful to him for giving me that confidence and that love for that part of myself that I really didn't like. And it gives me like a measure of like, not all men are going to be freaked out by it. You know, some people are squeamish and that's fine, but you're not for me then. Because, yeah, it happens randomly.
What about you, Leonie? Do you disclose it?
So I think, like pre-diagnosis, I think I couldn't hide the fact that I had difficult periods. And all, you know, the boyfriends were experiencing what, you know, I had one, I think my teenage boyfriend, my high school, I suppose you say your high school boyfriend. I had a flare-up when I was at his house one time, and he lived really far away from me. I lived like in Newham. He lived in South, and we were quite young, and it was so bad. He had to accommodate me on the train home, and I just remember going in and out of like, I don't know how he would have dealt with that at such a young age. I think he might have been 18 at the time. But yeah, so I couldn't hide the fact that I have painful period issues, but because I only got officially diagnosed 2022, so all that time, I would kind of preface my partners by saying, look, I have really painful periods. Of my last relationship, that partner was fully aware of what was going on because he was diagnosis journey, and when things got unfortunately post-surgery for me, my symptoms got worse. So I'd be in A&E every other month. I'd be flaring in the middle of the night.
What can A&E do?
Nothing. I mean, they can give you some other than put you on a
Codeine.
Codeine.
Morphine.
They'll do a scan, won't see anything, and refer you back to go back to your specialist, especially if you're under specialist. And then all the MRI has shown more developed things on my end. Normal ultrasounds never pick anything up on for me. So it's kind of frustrating when I have one and they're like, it's clear. I'm like, well, yes, it is. It's always been clear. Or it's always been clear of you won't pick up endo. Yes, do an MRI perhaps and we'll see what's really going on. I think it's important. Yeah, it's important to let a new partner know. And I definitely do that.
Does sex hurt?
At certain times of the month, yes, more than others. It used to be a lot worse than it is now, and certain positions can be a little bit more painful for me than others. Yes and no. So it's like the context.
I'm the same.
The context is really important, and I think like communication with your partner as well, and not feeling like being with someone who doesn't make you feel like, oh, you've ruined it kind of thing, because when I was younger, I would just grin and bear it because I didn't want to ruin it for him. But I was like, but it's already ruined for me, so it's ruined. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. But now the intercourse for me, like penetration, would sometimes cause bleeding, but like it wouldn't be. It's not all the time, and like I've been grateful to have the experience of somebody who like it just really doesn't faze them. As long as like I'm okay, they're okay.
I think that's so key though. I think having a partner that you can trust. If you're with somebody that you can't trust to kind of be mindful of your experience, it's not going to be a good situation. So you have to be somebody that you can trust. You can trust that they understand your kind of your boundaries and your parameters, because equally, like if it becomes uncomfortable for us, it doesn't make sense to grin and bear. You have to have that communication. You have to feel safe enough that you can say, oh, that's not going to work right now, or can we try this? Because sometimes it is painful, and it's just about trying to make sure it's a positive experience for yourself and the other person. Really, I don't really suffer with bleeding. I just it can be painful at times. Sometimes it can have the adverse effect, so it can be helpful. But then it's normally followed by pain. Always, it's always so. It's kind of got its varying degrees of how it can be.
So, because obviously, let's say if you do bleed, or maybe you're feeling the pain.
Yeah.
So maybe then it puts you off. Maybe does it put you off having sex?
I think for me, if I'm in pain and I'm bloated and uncomfortable, you don't feel so sexy.
I was going to say that. Does it affect your self-esteem?
It can. But then if you're in a good situation, it can feel worth it afterwards, because obviously endorphins and things, and if you're definitely with somebody that you can trust and they understand, they're and mindful.
Sex is more than penetration as well.
That's the other thing. It doesn't always have to be. Yeah, there were so many other things that besides penetration. So I've even heard of I've never used it, but one of my health specialists spoke about this device called the ONUT.
I haven't heard of that either.
So I think it's like donut-shaped rings that you can put on the male partner to kind of help restrict how much depth.
Oh, really?
And sometimes I would put my hands like between us to stop that, to kind of like little tips and tricks, to control how deep they're going. If depending on the position, you need to do that. So
this is so interesting.
I think. Yes, there's pain, but you can still have a sex life. Can
you still get pregnant As in, if with endometriosis or all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Some
Makes it more tricky.
It makes it harder
Okay.
for some women, most definitely.
Yeah.
Fertility, because also like with endo, I think it's important to point out it's not a one size fits all at all.
Yeah.
And it affects everyone differently. So some people only find out they have endo because they're having issues getting pregnant on their fertility journey, and they might not have any pain symptoms or period problems. They might just be struggling to conceive, and then they find out they have endo, you know, that's affecting the reproductive organs, tubes, ovaries, or whatever area. And then, but then there are some women that have multiple pregnancies, and then there are some women that have miscarriages, and I think it affects everyone differently, but it definitely can affect fertility and pregnancy.
You mentioned earlier before we recording, you said that the doctor said to have a baby and you'll fix something.
Yeah, that when I first got diagnosed, you've probably, you've had this as well. A lot of women I've spoken to have had this too. When I first got diagnosed with endometriosis, literally the consultant after my surgery comes into the room and she's like, have a baby, you know, get pregnant, have a baby, it will balance your hormones, it will sort everything out.
So endometriosis, is it a imbalance of hormone, or is it actually...
There's a lot. Hormones definitely impact it, because estrogen can help drive the condition, because estrogen is estrogen is proliferative. It helps things to grow, you know, it helps things to develop. So the thoughts behind why pregnancy can help is you put a pause on estrogen for those 9 months, pretty much, because your main hormone during pregnancy is progesterone. So I think that's the medical thinking behind it. And actually, not having children is not ever having children during your reproductive years is a risk factor for endometriosis, for hormone-led cancers and stuff, because you don't kind of get that break in estrogen, like kind of doing its thing in the body and helping things to grow, which also means, you know, cancerous cells as well.
Just thought of something, going back to like relationship, but not relationship, friendships now. Obviously, if you're in so much pain, you have to cancel plans. Have you had friends where like, oh God, like, or you think they must be saying something like, oh.
Relationships of all kinds are really difficult. I think it's hard when, like for me, initially it was a cycle issue. It was periods, 3-4 days a month. I would have to basically plan my whole life around these 3-4 days a month, ironically enough. But, you know, I knew, you know, everything was like, oh, I can't, if my period's going to fall, I'm going to try and avoid this appointment or this whatever. But all that to say, now, unfortunately, it's like an everyday thing. Obviously, people are not used to knowing you to be somebody that has to deal with pain all the time, or people remember me only maybe having 3-4 days a month where I couldn't function. So now, the way my pain flare-ups are, they're so unpredictable that, as I said to you before, I could be having a conversation like this 1 minute and the next minute I'm in diabolical pain. And then there are different types of pain. Like sometimes it's more of a contractual uterus pain. Other times it's more of a dull ache. It can be around ovulation. I get shooting pains. And what I would say is, I think people that know you don't understand, because it's an invisible illness. They don't really understand. So they'll be like, oh, if I'm like, oh, I'm in pain. Like, oh, okay, but can you come to this thing? Like, and then if I have to let you know, sometimes people find that a bit like, oh, well, you seemed okay yesterday. What's wrong now? Now, obviously, the people in my circle are amazing. I can only have people in my circle that understand, because the ones that don't, it's too triggering emotionally on my mental health, because I'm constantly trying to like think how to explain something, or I'm feeling guilty for something that my body and mind doesn't have the capacity to be worrying about when I have to take care of myself. So all that to say, yeah, I have amazing people in my circle, friends and family. But friendships have changed over time, and I've definitely experienced like the guilt of letting people down or being unpredictable, or maybe timekeeping issues are a thing, because I have to give myself like a lot more time. Sometimes when I'm getting ready, like pain will hit and it slows me down. And, you know, I can, maybe if I take like the really strong painkillers, I might be able to get through and, you know, through something. But I'm very, I feel like I probably present as quite an inconvenient person, and it's the unpredictability of it. So it naturally is going to have an impact on all kinds of relationships, from work, friends, family, the romantic. So yeah, it's definitely a factor.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you need people that kind of understand, like, so that you don't have to then bear guilt of having to explain something that should be kind of understanding around it.
Yeah. No, I would agree as well.
What would you say other stuff that people don't know, wouldn't expect? So, for example, we mentioned about relationship, friendship, work. What else? Sex. What else?
It can impact other organs quite massively. So, I mean, it can grow on other organs besides the reproductive organs. It can affect people's lungs, thoracic endometriosis. So it's not something I experienced, but there are people that deal with collapsed lungs and chest pain and things like that. It can impact your bladder and your bowel, which in my case it does. So in extreme cases, it can cause incontinence with urination. It can cause issues with going to the toilet, bleeding, back passage bleeding, prolapse. There are some extreme things that are connected to this, which is why I get quite frustrated when it's kind of batted about really loosely as it is a gynecological condition, because it's heavily driven by, from what we understand of it, the estrogen side. But this is a full body disease. It's a chronic.
Oh, it is a
illness.
disease.
Oh yeah, it's a disease. Because and it's incurable also.
Yeah, so I was going to say, like, you know how they say NHS, the treatment. What treatment can it give you then?
Hormones, painkillers, pregnancy, hysterectomy.
Have they ever given you that option?
Yeah. They pretty much. Yeah, I think in an ideal, with adenomyosis, they say the definitive cure technically is a hysterectomy, because that means taking the womb out. With endo, I think the issue is when it latches on, obviously it affects the areas outside of the womb and the uterus. So in some cases, I've heard of stories where women have undergone hysterectomy, hoping that they're going to be pain-free. But by this point, the endo's already started affecting the bladder or the bowel or the nerves, so they still got pain. So then they go through making that very drastic step of, especially if they're still in childbearing years, having a full hysterectomy, and then, oh well, I'm still in pain. That wasn't the treatment then, you know.
That's what I'm saying. That's basically like let's try this.
Yeah, it's all trial and error.
They don't know what the root problem is, do they?
There's a lot of
Not
research
really.
needed.
There's lots of different theories,
Yeah.
and the latest. Oh, I'm gonna mess it up. The latest research that's being done by I don't know what you would call them, but there's a woman called Lara Brydon, basically, who does a lot of research on endometriosis. She writes books and stuff, and one of the latest theories that she's kind of really been discussing and putting forward is the bacterial contamination theory of endometriosis, which is basically like a crosstalk between the gut microbiome and the immune system, and how that affects and drives endometriosis. So there is a lot of immune dysfunction when it comes to endometriosis as well. Like when we're looking at some of the latest science that's come out or coming out. So there is, even in the holistic world, there is no real definitive answer as to what the cause is. There are lots of different drivers which can be addressed, managed, but it's, I think regardless of what route you decide to go down, it can be very costly, it can be very time consuming, it can, if you let it can really take over, but you almost have to allow it to take over, give it your full attention so that you can find out what works for you, so you can manage it and actually step back into your own life, because it can be really all-consuming.
I don't know if it's a stupid question, but because you have this condition or disease, however what you call it, obviously NHS know, I assume, that you're on the records, right? Do you get free painkillers?
No.
Are you eligible for that? No.
No. And it's actually been listed that the NHS have a list of top 10 painful conditions, and endometriosis is on that list, along with, I can't remember what the other ones that are on there that are you know, you read through the list and you kind of know because of like the awareness of how painful these conditions are. And endometriosis is on that list, and you're like, you know, it's kind of like an eye opener to people who don't understand that it's being compared to some, you know, some of the most painful conditions that we've known about for a really long time. So
I still feel like it doesn't get mentioned when we talk about chronic illness. You'll never see endometriosis. Like, even if you Google it, it won't come up. It will be something that is, because again, it's gynecological and it affects women, or, you know, those body parts. So it's, and again, like, because of the varying degrees of how it affects individuals, how extreme it can be, it can be considered a disability. But
it can.
So I just think there's so much research that's needed. There's a lot of things that they're trying to like improve. Diagnostic wait times, that's a big one, because women are having to wait way too long to get diagnosed. Some GPs don't seem to have the knowledge to know to escalate cases onto specialists, and it just means more suffering, and also a condition that's sat untreated for how long can only get progressively worse. And, you know, things like hormones are, again, it's like kind of placeholder stuff. It's not a cure. It's something to help manage. Even the suggestion of pregnancy is to help manage, because it's diverting a hormone to a different area. But it's all delaying tactics. There's nothing, apart from the hysterectomy, which again, if the endo has now spread further than the reproductive organs, okay, there's still a pain issue. So really poor treatment options, quite frank. Painkillers are kind of my... I don't like the fact that I have to rely so heavily on strong painkillers, but it's just become a part of my reality that I've got to function somehow, so I have to lean on that quite heavily. But it's not ideal, you know.
What's the worst period story?
Kind of want to say the one where my manager was like, "Are you really sick?" Like, that scarred me.
Or even maybe like stories where period's so heavy that you're like, oh my god, like, I don't know, like most embarrassing moment.
Came on my period wearing white jeans once, and it just like went everywhere. I was with Andrea, actually. We were teenagers, and we were out. I've not worn white from the waist down. I just don't wear white anymore, because you just don't know if it's around that time of the month.
Awful. Those things are awful, like bleeding, things like that. Mine kind of revolve more around the pain element. And
have you ever passed out on the street?
Yeah, I passed out in public. The anxiety element as well. Like, back to the mental health sort of question. One thing for me, which I don't think a lot of people might realise affects some people, there's an anxiety element of the unpredictability of the condition. Means you don't know. So even if you decide you're going, like, you don't know what's going to happen. Like, you could be okay 1 minute, and then you could be susceptible to passing out or throwing up, and you're in public, and it's very vulnerable being around. It's not, you don't feel very safe. So I think my worst story was probably the one where I did pass out. I was trying to go to work, and then like Stratford, and even like my memories of it are so hazy, but I remember being so hazy that I was like seeing double and stuff, and I was trying to head to Devon's Road from Stratford, and I felt like I was going to fall on, like, it was bad. So then I ended up going the other way back home and getting the overhead to sort of Romford direction. And honestly, like, I mean, it was awful. It was like extreme pain. I passed out. I remember being helped to kind of safety, so to speak. Like, I was put on a bus, so it wasn't like I still had to get home, but it was really frightening, because it's like you kind of feel like you leave your body for a moment, and you're just kind of watching this thing unfold, and it's frightening because you're in agony, but you're so out of it. You know, that kind of pain that's so extreme that you're going to pass out. And I obviously did, and I came back around, and then it was just an awful experience. And I just have a fear of, like, I can manage my pain at home. I mean, I've been managing terrible periods for a long time, and now I have to manage daily pain. So, you know, it's difficult, but I zone out and do what I have to do on my own. But having to deal with being around people is difficult for me because I feel uncomfortable for other people to have to witness how bad it can get. And I don't want them, because they'll feel helpless. Naturally, no one can help you really. They can just comfort you, but you have to get through it. So yeah, I think my worst stories have been like being in public and having those situations happen and just feeling like, oh my God, like exposing and scary really, and just frightening.
I have a question for you. Have you ever been sent to A&E with appendicitis? Like they thought that your pain was appendicitis, and then you'd get tossed aside when they realise it's something to do with your, you know.
So I've been in A&E several times, and to the point where I know why I'm going in. I've been by ambulance before, and I'll say I have. Some people say don't say this because you won't get the treatment. They'll just be like, oh, endometriosis. It's almost like the unsolvable issue where we can't do anything but give them drugs and send them home. But I would say like it's a flare up. And they'd sometimes still insist on doing all the kind of investigations to rule out that, which I can see to some degree. It's like them trying to be thorough, but I'm very sure what this is. And then the minute we don't think it's anything to do with that. I've been in A&E for 18 hours before after being escalated by an ambulance, and I then got put onto the gynae, escalated onto the gynae, and then they couldn't even give me a scan on the day. They were like, come back in a week. That they don't. Yeah, they really they don't take it seriously. They don't take it seriously at all.
Okay, well, I think this could go on forever. I would love to, but I don't have another guest. Yeah. So yeah, because it's just so interesting. Like, I'm fascinated now, actually, because it's just
so many layers. I feel like we've just scratched the surface today, really.
I feel so too. Yeah. So maybe we could do a part 2, maybe. Anyway, so how can people get in touch, or how can people?
So my Instagram is Leoni Sheriff. I have Sensing by Sheriff is my perfume brand as well, which is at Sensing Sheriff on Instagram. Everything is Leoni Sheriff. You can Google and TikTok, YouTube. Everything will come up. Spotify. So Leoni Sheriff.
My Instagram is Nutrition with Andri, and my website is www.nutritionwithandri.com. I'm not on YouTube and TikTok. Everyone keeps telling me I should get on those, but it's just mainly my website and Instagram, how people can get in touch. And I'm a little bit off Instagram at the moment, but I will come back eventually, so I will get back to you if you get in touch.
Amazing. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you. Anyway, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for tuning in. As always, please show me some love. 5-star rating. If you haven't subscribed to me, to my YouTube channel, please do so, because it will help me grow my channel and reach out to more people, because all I want to do is just spread love and help more people. So anyway, see you at the next episode. Mwah.